So now coming on to next point, work out your gravity and lateral loads. This is again a major lag wherein I feel which all the graduates when they go in they see, because again we are given a cookbook example that this is your some x kilonewton dead load, some x kilonewton live load, and some x kilonewton wind load or seismic load or xyz loads. No one in your curriculums make you understand that if I'm saying my beam which is spanning 20 meters, it has 10 kilonewton per meter of dead load, but where did that 10 kilonewton meters of UDL load come out with? I mean, who is saying it's going to be acted upon with a 10 kilonewton meter of a dead load? I'm saying it's going to be 15 kilonewton per meter. You are underestimating it. Someone might come in and say that it's going to be 8 kilonewton per meter. You're overestimating it. And believe me, 10% of variation plus or minus makes a huge difference. If you're underestimating it, there are chances that you might end up with an under-designed building, under-designed structure. If you're overestimating it, there are chances wherein you would end up overestimating the stuff, over designing the building, and again making the things costlier, which are not making the money go in there, which is not required, and again creating a bad impression. So you always want to be on a very thin line, on a very thin rope, wherein if you just wobble a little bit and you are all the way down there. So it's like a major lag that I feel. So coming on to gravity loads, what all stuff gravity load would comprise of? Now gravity loads are, there are a lot, so I'll break it again into pieces like dead loads and live loads and other type of gravity loads we'll talk about later on. But first talking about dead load part. When we say gravity, I hope everyone knows when I say gravity, or everyone is able to understand what I mean by gravity. It is acting all downwards. Gravity is pulling you down, so it's sitting there and it's going to act downwards. It's going to put some pressure on the building. It's going to push it down. So first thing is dead loads. Now, what all stuff would go in there onto dead loads? It is going to be like, as the name itself suggests, it's dead. It's sitting there. It's always going to stay there. It's not going to, there are very few chances wherein these dead loads would be reducing down the line. It would be reducing if you're doing any alterations. If not, then it's always going to stay there. So that's why we call it dead loads. So it is all like insulation and your roofing material. When I say insulation, I suppose you guys can understand. It's kind of a barrier wherein you don't want your exterior temperatures to be impacting your interiors of the building, which is very rare we see into the Indian scenario, because we all do concrete. Concrete, it's a good enough barrier, but still with concrete, it's still not good enough. In some of the special cases, in some of the special requirements, people do go with roofing and insulation on top of concrete as well, if as and when required. So otherwise, if it's a steel deck, or if it's a light gauge deck, a light gauge roof, or if it's a wooden roof, or if it's a precast roof, there are chances that you would be seeing insulation and roofing on top of those. So insulation and roofing, then we talk about roof. So roof can comprise of, as I quoted some of the examples, it can be a metal deck, it can be wood, it can be light gauge, it can be precast planks, it can be a concrete slab, it can be a composite slab, depending on your requirement from the client, from the project. The next thing that comprises of dead load is structural steel or concrete or precast members. So it's like whatever your structural elements are. So your structural element, whatever that might be, it is going to stay there in the lifespan of the building. It's not going to go anywhere. So these are some of the examples that I wanted to show in. MEP. So what is MEP? It's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. When you are into your curriculums, no one talks about what is MEP, what is mechanical, electrical, plumbing. All you are told is that 10 kilonewtons per meter of UDL or X kilonewton per meter square of area load is acting, and this is the beam span, slab span, and take up the load on beam and design. But where did that come from? MEP is a major part of it. Now, depending on whether that's a residential building, whether that's a commercial building, whether it's a lab facility, whether it's a special lab, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a specialty hospital, whether it's a mall, whether it's a school building, whether it's some kind of special structure like maybe radioactive facility, or whether it's an office building, whether it's X number of examples, X number of type of buildings which you would see. Based on the utilization of the building, these MEP loads do vary. If I talk about a pumping station, I would be seeing some more MEP loads into pumping station compared to what I would be seeing into a residential building. There are X number of more requirements that would be going up there into a pumping station, or into a maybe industrial facility. I would be requiring a lot of mechanical and plumbing part and electrical part maybe. And then the next part that is again very common in all the buildings, that is ceiling. What kind of ceiling that is there? Even though this can be a light element, very very light element, but you have to estimate it. You have to see what's the ceiling material in some of the cases. And some of the requirements from client, they might require element into ceiling because of whatever reason. Next reason, maybe aesthetics, maybe sound insulation, or few other examples to quote in there. It can be some heavy element as well. Be it heavy, be it light, you want to stay as accurate as possible to design an efficient structure and to not overestimate any of the things. And there are a lot of other miscellaneous items. Just to quote some of them, you might if it's a kind of a industry in there, they have some of the specific requirements would be they are hanging very big fans in there, so they might require it. So you cannot put it a big fan in there, you cannot put it under MEP as an area load. You have to take some concentrated load there, and you have to design some special framing on top of it to support hanging of it. So again, some miscellaneous items that are going in there. When you estimate all these and you sum all these up, that's when you find out what your dead loads are going to be. And again, I would quote, there is going to be no one in the industry who is going to help you with find out what all elements are going on up on there, and what all dead loads it comprises of, and what all things you have to sum it up. It's all you who have to go in, and if you know on the forehand what all things are going up there, it would be an advantage, and you can kind of pace up a little bit. If you not, it might take some time to get used to the things and get learning of these things. Down the line, you are required to do it on your own, and down the line with the experience, you would just see, okay, if I'm doing a metal roof deck, my dead load is going to comprise somewhere around 1 to 1.2 kPa. If I'm 8 to 9 years experienced into the industry, if someone comes in and says that, okay, it's a metal roof deck and my dead load is 3 kPa, so I would straight away, my eyes would pop out. Okay, but why your dead load is 3 kPa with metal roof deck? It's three times higher. Why it's so high? So these kind of understanding you have to develop down the line, and there's no one in the curriculum who is teaching you these things. It's industry, it's experience who makes you learn these things. Now, as I quoted some of the points here, I'm just showing these things with a classical example of a metal roof deck. What all things would be. So first thing, that number one here that you could see is this is some kind of insulation. It can be, again, in insulation there are a lot of variations, lot of material that are available that can act as insulation. Some are lighter ones, some are heavier ones. So depending on the requirements of the project, depending on the specifications from the client, from the architects, we get to know that what is the roofing element, what is the insulation element. And I hope you guys can see it, very thin line on top of this slope here, insulated slope here. That is some roofing element. You cannot have your insulation exposed. That's roofing. Then down here, as I mentioned, steel joist. It's kind of a truss, prefabricated, can be fabricated on site, can be prefabricated depending on the requirement, which would again comprise of dead weight. It is going to sit there. Then the fifth number here, it's ceiling. what is the ceiling element, even though from this cross section we cannot see what the ceiling comprises of, but in some of the drawings you would see somewhere notified what kind of ceiling this is. Number four, these are some ducts that are going through for your HVAC requirement. When I say HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC. So what are my heating requirements? What are my ventilation requirements? What are my air conditioning requirements? So I hope you guys can understand when I say heating, that means if I require some heat in there. When I say ventilation, I require the constant circulation of my air coming in, some percentage of pale air, some percentage of fresh air. You have your own units up there that are doing this job for you, and some air conditioning that we have seen into almost everyone's homes and offices and colleges and places that we go in. So HVAC requirement, and then again there are some plumbing requirements. There are some electrical equipments that are hanging up from the roof, hanging up onto the ceiling, and which is ceiling is ultimately hanging up from the roof. So ultimately, it's all going on to structural elements. It's all going on to roof structural element. Now we don't go in and we don't. What we do is, when I say insulation and roofing, you take some area load. When I say roofing material, what is going to be a structural roof, you take some area loads. What is going to be a structural steel, you don't go in and find out each and every member. You take some area load. You get some. You do some computation. You find out some number to make life easier for MEP as well. You don't go in and find out the weight of each and every duct and you see in which location what is the load of that duct and you apply it into your structural model. No, that's going to eat up a lot of your time. So we take some judgment, we do some computation, we round it off, and we put it on the whole roof as an area load to make things a bit more efficient, not so time consuming. So it's all again comes to the main point that we spoke about. This is a problem. You need to spot it out. You need to find a solution which is efficient enough. It's not much time consuming, as well as it solves your purpose. It gives you an efficient structure. Okay, so now coming on to other types of gravity loads, that would be live loads, which you can go in and see from your codes. Then it is snow loads, that is roof live loads. When I say live loads here, I should have stated a little bit more in here. I mean to say floor live loads, roof live loads, construction live loads, rain loads, temperature loads. Now, I doubt if there is any curriculum which is covering up all these loads. All we could see into the curriculums is dead loads and live loads, some UDL. Some in some cases we might see some dead loads and snow loads, but no one is going to teach you where this live load came from. No one is going to tell you where this snow load came from, what kind of live load on floor you're taking, on what basis. No one ever talks about construction live load. And believe me, this is a very, very, very critical point that goes into the design of each and every building. And especially when you're doing a composite roof slab, this construction live load plays a huge part in designing of the structure. And not to frighten you guys, but just to give you an idea upon, I have seen some of the cases if an engineer misses on this construction live load, and while doing construction, I have literally seen the floor sagging by it's half more than half a meter. The structural element literally sag down there, and it's all coming down, and you have to stop the construction. And believe me, it's not only bad impression, it's huge cost impact. It's a huge cost impact on client, on project. Your project cycle stops, your progress stops. You get into the investigation. There is not only construction cost that is involved, the other processes that needs to be done after that kind of issue. It's a lot more cost in there. So it's very, very important that you visualize all the loads that are acting on the building. You try not to miss on any of these. You try not to miss on any of the scenarios that are going to act upon, and you take up your best judgment. We don't want to overestimate the staff. We don't want to take all the cases, even though if it's not applicable, we just want to stay on that very, very thin line. It's very, very thin. So I would say, when you guys go into the industry, this part, dead loads, when you're computing it, and when you're computing your other gravity loads, and when you're computing your lateral loads that we would talk upon later on, please pay a lot of attention onto this. Try to grasp these things very, very carefully. It would be very, very helpful to all of you down your line. So again, I'm just going to state some of the examples wherein what how a live load would look like. So when you go into the code, you would get a table. I hope most of you guys have seen IS 875 and various parts of it, where you would find dead load, live load, and seismic loads and wind loads. So this is again one of the codes, one of the snapshot that I've taken from one of the codes, which is stating live loads. And again, snow loads, Indian codes are not talking much about snow load as far as I am aware of. If there are some of the latest version wherein it has been introduced a little bit more in depth in there, I'm not very much sure about. But this is what a snow load would look like. There would be some drift getting into picture. There would be some flat roof snow load, some windward drift, some leeward drift. This is all again very very the drift and flat roof snow load and windward drift and leeward drift. These are all very very specifics which I'm not planning to go in right now, because again it's a whole separate topic to talk about. But just to give you an idea of what all things would look like, now I hope you guys could understand when I'm saying construction loads what I mean to say. If your roof load after it's completed, it's very less than these many people standing on top of it, and you didn't consider the construction load, believe me, it's with so many people standing on top of it and working in a very riskier scenario, it's a huge thing to be missed, I would say. Never ever try to end up, or never ever I mean, I cannot imagine about this kind of scenario if I missed it. If I missed it, believe me, this is all going to come down. And if this comes down, there are too many people standing on top of it. And I hope you guys can understand the severity of it. And rain loads. So some of the cases I have seen, those are huge roofs. There is just couple of inches, like 1 or 2 or 3 inches of rain ponding that is going to happen on the roof. But because the roof is very, very light gauge, it's very kind of efficient structure. There is not much of room in there for any extra loads to come in. Couple of water ponding on top of roof can have the whole roof come down. And I don't remember the name of the stadium, but it's a worldwide known example. There was a stadium which had a light gauge roof. They didn't consider rain load, and the roof of whole stadium, because of some water ponding on top of it, it came down. The whole stadium roof. You can imagine the size of the roof, and luckily there was no crowd in there. The stadium on the rainy day was empty. There was no show. There was no event happening. So it was a lucky escape. But if it would have been people inside, it is thousands of people we're talking about. Some teams playing under that roof. It's very risky. Temperature loads. So again, temperature loads. These are very minor in nature. But if we miss them, there are chances that you might end up with these kind of scenarios. So when I say temperature loads, I hope you guys could understand. If you're talking about steel, temperature variation, if just to put an example, when we talk about Middle East, during daytime you might see temperature of 50 degrees, 50 plus degrees, 55 degrees, and on some severe day it might go a couple of degrees even more than 55, 57, 56. It's huge. And in the very same day during nights, it'll drop down to 25, 28, 30 degrees. So 25 to 30 degrees of variation in temperature during a daytime, during 5-10 hours of the time, it's huge. So in the life cycle, when we talk about building design, we're talking about 50 years of lifespan, 60 years of lifespan, 70 years of lifespan, based on the importance category of the building. You don't want to ignore those kind of loads, because these temperature variations down the line, down the building lifespan, it's huge impact on the structural elements. So you want to consider these loads as well, these stresses as well, so that you have some extra capacity for steel to expand and contract, and or concrete or whatever material you're using. Now coming on to next point, design of gravity system. As I quoted before, here we are talking about gravity. We were talking about gravity system, which are these columns here and beams on top of it and joist on top of it and metal deck and some secondary elements. I'm not going to go in depth and talk about what this gravity system design is. I suppose most of you guys already know how to design a beam, how to design a column, how to design a joist, how to design a slab, or how to design any secondary elements. So you go in and you design your gravity system, and similarly you go in and you design your lateral system. But just one thing that I would like to quote here, I have seen this happening a lot during recent times. Even I was under this impression when I got into the industry. I was like, if I'm using X software, I would not name any, but any X software, I'm using it, that's it. I don't want to know anything else. But that's not the case. Always have the habit to, you should be knowing the software, you should be knowing how to use it. Those are very efficient, those are very time saving, but you also have to know what this software is giving you. If you it's there's a very good saying, if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. If you feed in garbage, you receive garbage in return. So you should be knowing what you are putting inside the software, which we talked about: computing dead loads, computing live loads, computing all other conditions, and putting up those in the software. So you should be having a feel of what all input you're putting in there, and similarly you should be having a feel of what all output you are putting in there. And just to re-quote an example, when I said, if I'm talking about a metal roof deck, and if someone I know with the experience that 1.2 1.5 kPa of area load for metal roof deck is good enough. If someone comes in and says that metal roof deck we have 3 kPa of dead load, I would straight away put a question mark there. This is not supposed to be 3 kPa. Just check in and then put it again into the software. 3 kPa is very, very overestimated for a metal roof deck. So these kind of understanding you have to put in. And but if you just go in and put it in a software that 3 kPa is the dead load, it is going to give you outcome. It is going to give you structural system which would be capable enough to support 3 kPa, but it would be over designed. So you would be ending up putting up a lot of material in there which is not required, which would be not so cost efficient design. We don't want to do it. Similarly, with the lateral system, you should be knowing how to compute them, how to compute the lateral loads, how to decide lateral system, and how to kind of design those, how to put it in software, and what kind of outcome to expect. This is not expected from any grad going in and to know that what kind of output is expected, but what newly grad very fresher engineers should have a habit of, that you take the output from software, you do some manual computation, you verify it, what software is giving, whether it's correct or not. If it is not matching with your manual computation, please go in and dig in into the software, or talk to someone so that you can get to know what all stuff we are talking about. Now, at the last, coming on to coordination, even though I have kept this point at the last, just to have it in the list, but if I go back on to first slide, what we did is we saw the architectural plan, and based on the architectural plan, I saw wherein I could hide my structural elements behind the architectural elements. So I did that coordination with architects. So that's a coordination point. I did coordinate where the walls are. I did coordinate where the windows are. I did coordinate how the elevation is going to look like. I did coordinate what kind of special requirement on roof is. I did coordinate what my height of the building is. So I did it right on the day one. It's coordination. Then again, going on to next point, we have coordination with mechanical. Now, coordination with mechanical, again, going back, these are some of the mechanical elements. When we say HVAC, if you guys remember, I mentioned some ducts going and some units sitting on top of it, some electrical, not electrical, we're talking about mechanical. So mechanical, basically in a building, there can be HVAC, but there can be a lot of the special requirements. But to quote an example, I'll just talk about HVAC. So just these kind of things, you have to coordinate. To show this example, this duct is going throughout the length of my building. It's spanning from this side to all the way up to this side, or maybe somewhere in the between it is stopping. So I need to coordinate. Mechanical guys need to coordinate that it's not clashing with any of my structural elements. If it does, on site, it's creating some lag. It's creating some kind of stopping on the site, some questions on the site, and you don't want to have questions on the site, and you don't want to have all your labor force and all your material sitting up on the site idle to answer these kind of questions. So we try to sort out all the coordination items with architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, as well as civil. With civil, as I mentioned, a classic example of grading up here, grading plan. When I said 300 meters at this point and 280 meters of grade elevation at this point, so I did that coordination with civil right in the beginning, even before going into the design of foundation. So I got to know what kind of my foundation is going to be like, what kind of elevation, grade elevations are there, and what all elevation I'll put up my finished floor at, and I'll put up my foundation at. So that's a coordination at right in the beginning or during the project cycle with civil discipline. So it's like, even though I have put up these points at the end just to have it in the list in down the line, but this coordination items, these are major ones. There are a lot others. This is not all of it, but just to make you guys understand, you need to do the coordination right. Start doing the coordination right on the day one. You need to have understanding of all these elements right on day one. You need to start designing a building keeping all these things in mind. It's not only just taking the loads and doing the beam design, taking the loads and doing the column and foundation design, slab design. No, that's not only it. That's hardly 5% of it. 90-95% is what these all things would impact your design. You need to know what all these things are, and believe me, if some of these points are missed, it's a huge mess for any of the project. It's a very bad impression on your clients. It's very bad impression inside the company of any person missing these items. These are very critical, very critical, and very much of cost impacting items. So you don't want to miss any of the item which is cost impacting. Again, I have quoted some of the examples here, some detailed examples here. So this is an architectural detail wherein they're showing how they want to have this roof built up on top of a flat roof. So we saw this section, and looking at this section, I just found out wherein I can have my structural elements laid out, how my structural framing is going to stay there so that it gets hidden inside the architectural elements. It doesn't kind of show up out front, so that the building looks pretty neat and clean, but it's very well supported. It's strong inside. It's like the skeleton which you're hiding inside your skin. So architectural element is a skin, and you want to put up your skeleton behind the skin. You don't want to have your skeleton popping out of your skin. So that's a coordination item with architecture. Again, an example. So there is this masonry kind of thing here in the architectural facade that they want to show here, but this cannot hang all in here. So I have to go in and put up some angle and some framing there to support that. Similarly, with MEP, as I went back and showed that, okay, this with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, this kind of things would look like, and you want to have all these elements coordinated straight away. You don't want to end up on site with these things clashing, because it would be like there would be a general contractor, there would be a steel contractor, there would be a mechanical, and in mechanical it would be HVAC contractor, plumbing contractor, electrical contractor. With you're talking about 10 different people, 10 different agencies working on site, and believe me, all of them are very rigid. They always want to be tight on their schedule, because all are working with some cost impact. And if you ask them, any one of them, to hold back to get the answers when they are on the site, they would not be happy. They would be asking you a lot of questions. They would be putting a lot of claims which are against you and which you don't want to end up being with. So this is a classic example of coordination with plumbing, wherein your plumbing is going down, and there is very classic case wherein your plumbing is coming from inside of the building and it has to go outside, and there is some stem wall going all the way down, and you have some footing. You don't want your pipe to go underneath the footing. If your pipe is going from underneath of the footing, there would be loads acting on the footing and it would crack the pipe, which is not the ideal scenario. So all you want to coordinate is either have, if this pipe has to go from below the footing, you want to have enough depth so that it's not acted upon by too many stresses, or else you want to have it go out of the building from the footing top. You don't want the pipe to go all the way from the between the footing depth. That's not the ideal case. But in some of the cases, you have to find a way out. If it's a drainage pipe, so drainage pipe has to go in with some X slope. You cannot alter with that slope. You can make the slope steeper, but you cannot make it flat, or you cannot reduce that slope. It has to go with some minimum slope. depending on the conditions, you have to find a way out. There are X number of cases, there are X number of solutions which you would get to learn when you grow into your experience. You will get to learn. But just as I said before, these are very classic examples wherein you would see do a project life cycle that are happening. And again, I'll just go back before ending this presentation. I would just go back into this list. I would again quote here, this is not it. This is just part of it. There is a lot more that is going before this. There's a lot more that is going after this point. But these are very basic points which any grad who is going in, there would be an expectation that they do all these things. And believe me, with the help of skilling, if you guys are going into, there is a lot of opportunity out there. You can go into buildings, you can go into civil and infrastructure. Like when I say civil and infrastructure, like designing the water tanks, designing the bridges, designing some special structures. So any of the industry that you go in, there are too many industries out there. There are too many type of companies out there that are doing the design of various elements. These are the items, if not all, at least some of these, you will find it in each and every industry, believe me. And it would be with the help of skilling, if you're proceeding, if you know all these things right in the beginning, it would be a huge help to your growth, to your career growth, and it will be a huge help, huge impression onto the companies that are going in and looking for. So on that note, I think I'll end the presentation here.